not sure about the Facebook Live. Mungkin dia tengah lag sikit kot. So dah how long dah? How many years Izwan and Partners ni?
The firm was started last year. So the idea was to focus on technology companies and startups. So I work a lot with entrepreneurs, founders. So all the way from somebody who just left his job or her job, trying to set up a new business. So I help the person with that, or somebody who wants to invest in your company. So I'm the lawyer that helps with the whole fundraising. So that's the area that the law firm is focused on right now. I'm always very interested in entrepreneurship. So what else should I do as a corporate lawyer than work with the people that I like, which is why I set up the law firm last year.
Yes. As well as you can do e-commerce as well, kan?
So on the e-commerce side, yeah, I work with some e-commerce platforms. Different selling cosmetic products, selling consumer, even social enterprise is good. Like Langit, for example, they sell the rice from Borneo. It's a very special rice, so things like that.
Yeah. Okay, Central.
I think we are live now. Interesting.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can see. All right. Cool. Okay. I think we can start now. Hi, Assalamualaikum. Okay, thank you all for finding time and visiting today's session. Okay, my name is Salvi and I'll be the moderator for today. So we are now currently live on Magic's Facebook. And together joining us today is Izwan Zakaria from Izwan and Partners. So Izwan, how are you today?
Good, thank you. How are you doing? Good.
Okay, great as well. All right. So this webinar is actually a part of like a series of webinar that we've been doing this last week. So we have few more than 10, I guess, I believe now more than 10. And if you all interested to see or to watch the previous webinar, you can just go through our Magic's Facebook. All right. Okay. So as you can see, today's topic is actually hustling in the pandemic. So Izwan will share what startups and social enterprises can do in order to survive during this pandemic. Right? But before that, before I pass this to Izwan, I would like to highlight here, if you have any questions along the session, you might as well drop your question down on the comment section below and we'll try and answer it accordingly. All right. So Bismillah, over to you, Izwan.
Thank you, Salvi. Thank you very much. Very happy to I'm not at Magic now. I'm very happy to be here inside my house. I hope everyone is as well right now. Again, thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts in terms of, as where I'm coming from as a lawyer, working a lot with early stage companies, social enterprises and startups, and what are the things that businesses like, even myself as a law firm, I'm also a small business. So I think that at the outset, all of us need to take this to really accept that it is not an issue that is only affecting startups, but every business across sectors, not just in Malaysia, but across the world. So what I've done for my side is that I've done a slide which everyone can download by just going to our website after this. I'll be happy to put up the link. So you don't need to take screenshot or whatever because the slides will be there for you. I just want everyone to just go through the slides with me as I prepared for you earlier. So let me just put up the slide now. Let me see. Okay. Can you see it, Salvi?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So, the structure of this presentation, I think I also need to manage everyone's expectation here. The idea is to really look at what are the high level issues that if you are a business owner, if you are a startup founder, what are the things that you should be looking at when it comes to your business. So ultimately, the idea of this presentation is also to help you to make a decision of just whether or not you should go and get a lawyer to really listen to you. It doesn't have to be me, it can be anyone that you usually work with. So the outline of the discussion today will be about introduction, just a bit about what I do. And we'll be looking at the three most, in my view, important aspects of what a company is. First is the employee, dealing with the deals on whatever transaction that you may be going through right now, contracts, and the last section is some resources and materials that you could be looking at to get more readings and what are things that you should be looking at, and hopefully that will help you to go through this progress. The usual fine print, the information here is just, it's not meant to be legal advice, because obviously every situation is unique. I may not be able to, though the facts may appear similar, but the scenario that you're going through may be peculiar in a certain way, which is why it'd be best for you to really have a discussion with a professional counsel to really understand your situation. So this is just a bit about our law firm. We started last year to focus on working with tech companies and startups. These are some of the companies that we work. We're very fortunate to work with, as you can see, there's an accelerator. We work with e-commerce platforms. We work with social enterprises, like what I spoke to Saudi earlier. We are very passionate about entrepreneurship and helping to see how we can create additional value to grow the startup community. So I don't want to spend so much time on this, but just to give you a highlight of where the law firm is coming, is to really focus on working with entrepreneurs, working with small startups or early stage companies that are just trying to get off the ground. So what we do is that we help on the fundraising. We try to connect with other ecosystem enablers. We try to connect you with investors. We try to connect you with people that we know within our ecosystem and see how we can help you grow, not just giving a pure legal advice. So that's just a bit about the law firm. So the first thing that I want to talk about, not trying to go very bluntly, but if there's one important point of this presentation is perhaps this. Some of you may be bootstrapping, may not have employees, that's fine. But if those of you who have an existing employees, I want to spend a bit of time talking about this, because this is very important. The first paramount of priority as an employer, or you have fiduciary duties towards your employees. So, the usual stuff is obviously you need to comply with the government's directive. If you're not an essential business, obviously you can't operate from your office anymore. But this also means that you need to have a different perspective as to how would working from home arrangement will look like. So this is where I would really encourage, if you are a startup, if you're a small business, or even if you're early stage, have a proper process and procedures for working at home. Yes, you should do it now, not tomorrow or next week. You should do it now, because the first priority is to really protect your employees. So what are some ideas of what you can include? Things like staff travel benefits, for example, may no longer be applicable for now. You can put that on hold. Maybe you want to modify your sick leave, and how would your staff work from home? So that will be very crucial, because the idea is to ensure that the business continues as usual. And having this policy in place, you need to communicate these policies to your employees. So one tip that I want to highlight here is this Founder Institute came up with this interesting document that you can have a look. I'll put up the link there, but don't worry, you can get the deck after this. You can just Google up Founder Institute Coronavirus Plan, where it's free. It's a very nicely written document where you can look at what are the things that you can look at when it comes to making sure that the business continues as usual, notwithstanding the business needs to operate remotely. So this is a very tricky deck. I need to be careful when I deal with this. First, I must say very clearly that I'm not an employment lawyer expert, though these are some general principles of what it takes to, when it comes to difficult decision, if you may need to consider of doing a pay cut or terminating your employees. So at the outset, we need to be clear that the law allows the employer the right or the prerogative on how you manage your employees. But there are two important principles that you need to satisfy as an employer, which any action that you do must be fair and must be done in good faith. So what is fair and what is good faith is a big question mark, because it's a very subjective depending on the nature of the question of fact. So some of the situation that may occur probably be because of this pandemic, your business suffer a loss of profit, your business direction may need to change, you need to pivot to other things. So another important point that I want to highlight is that the layoff or even offering a pay cut to your employee should be the last resort. It's not something that you should immediately, because of this MCO going around, or tomorrow you send an email to everyone, all your salary gets slashed by 20% or 2%. So it cannot be done unilaterally. So what I've done essentially is to put some do's and don'ts just very quickly to look at. So before you even think about pay cut or termination, you must first look at what are the other things that you can cut in terms of any subscriptions, for example. If the employee is getting allowances, maybe you want to consider putting that on hold. Instead of cutting the salary, maybe you want to reduce the working hour and things like that. So the working hour, obviously, if you offer a pay cut, then the working hour should be reflective of the number of days that needs to work will also be substantially reduced. So the idea is that before you even do anything, you must first get the employee to consent to whatever proposal that you have in mind. So even if you want to do a pay cut and the employee agrees to it, get it done in writing. Can be a simple one or two letter to say that the parties agree as an employer and employee that the salary will be reduced. So I need to be very clear on this point, is that the making a unilateral salary deduction is not allowed, because it can be viewed as it is a breach of contract and may give rise to a claim for unfair dismissal. When it comes to employment laws in Malaysia, the laws are very inclined towards the employees, simply because the employees are the most vulnerable party here when it comes to even leverage, when it comes to negotiation, because the employer is the one that pays the salary. So these are a snapshot of what you need to look at when it comes to dealing with pay cut and termination. Again, I'm not an employment lawyer expert, but these are the general principles that you should be looking at. And obviously the idea is to have a mutual agreement between the employer and the employee before you even initiate any decision. So the next one is obviously the statistics that we all would have known by now. And Magic CEO, Madam Zoera, also spoke on Awani, highlighting this last 2 weeks, talking about out of 240 respondents, and many of the startups may not be able even to survive in the next 6 months if the lockdown continues, and even only 3% will be able to have the cash reserve for if the lockdown continues the next 12 months, which obviously all of us hope that will not be the case. But the idea is that, I mean, we all work in a very tight cash flow, and even law firms are also being affected. It's not just, again, we spoke about this earlier, Selby, that it's not just an issue faced by social enterprises or startup. It's a global issue facing every single business in every across industry, with exception to select few like education, healthcare, things like that. So I want to talk about this because this is an important point. I'm trying to give a practical steps that founders can take, which is obviously to cut your burn rate now. So the idea is to take decisive steps and don't be afraid to make hard decisions. So because the crash will have wider consequences for the global economy. It's not just going to be the COVID-19, and we all know now, and everybody is talking about an impending recession, and the US stock market's affected with the crude palm oil prices being affected, the global economy, and we're all with what more with the oil prices war going around with OPEC. I'm not trying to be banal about things, but the idea is that if you don't want to be part of statistics, you must at least plan for a year for a highly adverse business condition. So the point I'm trying to make from this slide is that please don't wait for things to turn around or hope that the market will suddenly miraculously get better. No, I'm not trying to suggest that you should be a pessimist. No, may not necessarily be a bad idea now to think about what are the things that you can cut from where you are to really get a bit more cash reserve. Things like if you got fancy office or some co-working space, maybe you want to put that on hold. And many co-working spaces are offering that option now. And if you have employees that you feel that may not be putting up the kind of expectation that you wanted, maybe you want to consider having a chat with the person and see whether or not the person can continue doing what you want the person to do. And obviously all the subscription that you may not need. Think really about look at your expenses and go through line by line and see what are the things that you can cut from where you are. Again, don't be afraid to make a hard decision on this. So again, I just wanted to give a snapshot of what I was talking to you earlier about. I mean, some may say that these are just pundits or economists making their own remark, but ultimately, the way how it looks from where startup fundraising market is coming from is already going to be a winter for many of us in the next 9 to 12 months. Again, I don't have a magic crystal ball here. I suspect that that's going to be the case. And the reason for that is because of this. Whatever the deal that you're doing now, get it done now if you can, because of the news articles that you've seen. Sequoia's Capital wrote the Black Swan post, I think 3 weeks ago. They reminded their founders and CEO that they're going to be massive layoff and a lot of M&As due to financial distress. And I think the important point that some of us may tend to forget is that venture capitals are businesses too. So they are also affected by this as well. How are they affected? I think earlier today, Jeffrey Payne from Golden Gate Ventures spoke on Founder Institute webinar with the team, and he also spoke about how venture capitals are really trying to look at their portfolio and look at their investments and trying to put them in different baskets. The first basket, those guys who are doing well, who are already cash generating, and how they can grow them further. And the second group are those who need a bit more support. And the third group that are those guys who they feel that need a bit more support, but because of the priority that they need to make now, they're putting more attention to the first and second group. Those guys who are already cash flow, were already cash generating, and the guys that need a bit more push. So this also applies if you are trying to close a new customer. So really, if you only have 12 to 18 months runway, start really looking for revenue now. So the perspective that I'm trying to offer from where I'm coming from as someone who deals quite a bit with fundraising work is that if there is an offer, or if you're going through an acquisition, if you got a term sheet ready from a VC, perhaps the offer or the term sheet may not be optimal or something that you may not have in mind, but if they're still acceptable, you should really consider to take it. And even if you don't want to take it, perhaps alternatively, it will be a good time for you to really go on offense to try and close the deal, because the VCs have got another challenge that they have to go through. They need to call their investors, because if they need to make future investment, they need to make capital call. In other words, they need to make sure that the investors are ready to put in the money. So these are the things that really important for you to consider if you're doing a crowdfunding now. Maybe you if you're considering going to crowdfunding, maybe you want to consider whether or not there is a investors' appetite to invest, or whether or not the investors may want to prioritize their resources to something else. Those are difficult decision that needs to be decided. But these are the things that you can look at, whether or not you want to take the existing offers or really go on offense to close the deal. So the next thing that I want to be looking at is contract. So the contract bit is also something that many lawyers have written about this. I just want to go through the key ideas of what are the things that you can be you can do. I'm not saying just you can do yourself, but the things that you can also look at from where you are right now, looking at the contracts that you have. So the first thing that I want to suggest is that if you got a clear example would be if you got a lease agreement with a landlord, that you've got a 2 years or 1 year lock-in period. The first thing you do, the best thing that you should do is to have a conversation with the counterparty. In this case, your landlord. If you got a expensive co-working space and a nice place, having a cozy relationship would be a good thing, because you can have a chat and see whether or not you can put can freeze the account, you can put a hold. I think it's also important to note that, again, everybody is affected by this pandemic now. Even landlords and your suppliers, your customers, they are in the same pain as you are in a different way. They also have perhaps contractual or financial obligations that they have with the banks, notwithstanding the moratorium. They also have to pay their own installments or whatever. So if you can get the counterparty or your customer, your suppliers to have a variation in the agreement, that would be the best scenario. So the two things that we can look at when it comes to dealing with contracts, the two potential relevant principles that many people have written about on this. First is a force majeure. I just want to go through a sample clause here. I mean, it's a very long-winded one, but this is an example of what a force majeure looks like. But what the idea is that in a force majeure situation, essentially is a French word that means for superior force or act of God. So the way how force majeure works is that the parties have agreed contractually that in the event that there is a scenario where it is something that is so out of the norm or out of ordinary, which is why it's called an act of God in some scenarios, is because it made it difficult for the parties to be able to perform their obligation. So the challenge with the force majeure clause is that, first, not many contracts may have them in the first place. That's one. So we'll be looking at another potential area that we can invoke, which is frustration. But looking at force majeure, courts have a very different way of looking at it depending on how the clause is structured. So there are cases that suggest that for this clause to be applicable, you must have the word pandemic, you must have the actual specific word of epidemic for it to be applicable. So again, it'd be a good idea if you have this clause to get a lawyer to have a look at it and see whether or not it may be possible for you to invoke this clause. So the next thing that we want to look at is this concept. It's a contractual principle known as frustration. So a contract is known to be frustrated when there is a change of circumstances that happened after the contract has been signed that made the contract physically impossible to perform. I need to be very careful here because, again, the principle is there, but how does it apply in the scenario, perhaps in a COVID-19 or the movement control restriction, for example? A clear-cut example perhaps would be if you are a startup, you go and book an event hall, and the next week after that, you can't do your event because of the government restriction order that tells you to stay at home. So that may be a potential example of how a contract is frustrated simply because of the government directive. So there are several things that you need to look at when it comes to invoking frustration. First is that it can only be done it can only be applied in a very narrow limit. In other words, the courts are very reluctant to allow a party to get away from a contract or an obligation just simply because you can't say that just because it's difficult, because it's more expensive to do your part of the contract and use that as a ground to terminate the contract. So for example, if you run a supply delivery startup, for example, if you're an e-commerce platform, it's hard for you to send the products or the goods to the customers. You may not be able to invoke this clause, invoke this ground simply because there are other options that you can look at. You can look at other logistics providers that will be able to allow you to send the goods. Maybe instead of sending all the goods at once, you can send it on a staggered basis. So the idea is that for this clause sorry, I keep saying clause, it's not clause, it's a principle. So for this principle to be applicable, you need to be able to demonstrate that the restriction that was imposed against you when it comes to the movement restriction order made it so difficult or so hard that for you to perform the contract, that made the performance of the contract impossible. Like the example of the event management earlier, for example. So to recap, I think we all also need to take the fact that contracts are agreement, they're not cast in stone. In other words, they're not like straight jackets where you're stuck with it. You can't do anything about it just because I signed this contract. I have to complete it. There's no such thing as unterminable contract or something like that. You can terminate the contract. You can breach contract so long as you understand what are the consequences for breaching the contract. This is no way suggesting that you should breach a contract. It's just to put it out there that there are sometimes legitimate reasons why a contract cannot be completed simply because of certain scenarios that are beyond the control of one party or both parties. In this case, would be the restriction order that we are all going through now. So I'm going to my last point already, actually, which is the succession plan. I think this is also another crucial plan that perhaps many of us working in a small business or running a small startup think that, well, why do I need a succession plan? I think one good way to look at it is that the coronavirus or the COVID-19 does not discriminate between an intern or a CEO. If so, in the eyes of the virus, both CEO and intern are the same. So perhaps if you have an older person running the company and the person is more vulnerable to the virus than the junior member of the staff. So again, take a look at that Founder Institute coronavirus business plan. I think a very interesting document that you can look at. Talks about what are the things that you can look at, because many of us will be working remotely. How do we have a disaster recovery plan in terms of in a normal lingo that I call business continuity plan? Like what happens if this person is not around? What if some person gets quarantined? The person goes in, you can't communicate with the staff because the person is in the hospital, being quarantined. What happens then? What happens to the work that is being done? If you have access and things like that. And obviously, having your data backed up. I think many of us use cloud storage. Maybe you want to have a backup storage in another server or another service providers to look at how you can make sure that your business can continue as usual. So I want to spend a bit more time looking at this because I think now that I guess many of us will have a bit more time to read as well. So I just want to, because what I've done is essentially just give you a high level and hopefully gives you some thoughts and what are things to look at and whether or not you should really consider speaking to your lawyer and have a chat more and see how they can help look at your contracts and dealing with with the situation that you're going through. These are some of the things that I think are quite useful that you can look at. First is there's a resource pack that was done by Found8, which is a co-working space, and they made it free for everyone to access. It's a link. You can download this link. I'll share you the link where you can download this deck. But these are some of the things that I find quite interesting that you can look. The second one is obviously, so Found8 came up with this long list of what are the things that you can look at, what are the other products and services being offered by other startups to offer to other businesses affected by COVID-19. The second one, obviously, many of us will already know, MTech also came up with their own tech relief, digital versus COVID hashtag that's going on. My law firm, our law firm is also one of the partners in this initiative, trying to see how we can help providing free and pro bono legal advice to companies affected by the COVID-19. And also, our law firm also has a small section where we put out all this list, like what you're looking at now. Sequoia Capital came up with these 2 documents, which I found very useful for those who are running technology companies. What are the things that you can look at, how you can manage your business operations in the next several months, and their notes to the founders and CEOs that talking about the Black Swan will also be interesting. The last 2 links I found very interesting is the article, a 2-part article by Dr. Siva from Proficio, which I found very useful, where he shared his experiences going through 3 different recessions already, and how the challenges were at that time, and how this situation that we're going through, though may be different in terms of its magnitude, but the point that he was trying to make is that those entrepreneurs and businesses which are resilient and trying to find a way of how they can stay not only resilient, but trying to find a new way to do things to continue offering value to the public. So these are some of the things that I found very interesting that I hope will be useful to everyone as well. So I got a quote that I thought very interesting from Freeze Post. So there will be a recovery, and when the recovery happen, will you be around to take advantage of the growth, or are you just going to be silent wondering what if? So all of us, same thing as well. What are we doing right now, apart from looking at the current business operation? Are we learning new skills? Are we trying to see whether we can value add? What are we doing to capitalize on the current scenario? What we spoke earlier, Sabi, about social enterprises earlier. I'm very amazed and humbled by the work that was done by the guys from Mereka Space, the BGBG guys. They saw that the frontliners needed help in terms of the protective equipment, and they thought to themselves, where we do all this 3D printing stuff, what can we do? And they got together and started doing all this DIY thing, and they made all the manual free for everyone to be able to use. So that is very interesting angle to see how they continue to stay resilient and really innovate during this difficult time. So obviously, above all, I hope everyone stays safe during these tough times. And you want to get a copy of the slides, you can get it from this link, izonpartners.com, and go to COVID Hub. So I'm done with my deck. I see there's some question, but let me just.
Yes, Izwan, there's a lot of questions queuing right now. Okay.
Okay, I need to figure out how to click the question. I need.
No worries. I read out the question for you. Okay. So yeah. All right. So Izwan, the first question comes from Bill. So which authoritative body governs fair work in Malaysia?
Again, I'm not an employment law expert. I need to be very clear about that. First, it's not very clear what fair work means as well. I think what you're suggesting is probably employment, which body governs employment in Malaysia. That will be the Labour Department. We have the Ministry of Human Resources. Just that when it comes to employment, there are 2 types of employment. The first is the employments that are governed by Employment Act, which refers to those people who earns below 2,000 ringgit, and the rest who earns above 2,000 ringgit, they are governed by Contracts Act. So when it comes to unlawful dismissal, the industrial court takes precedent and be able to hear this dispute. So I hope that answers Bill's question. In terms of authoritative body, it's not like this body governs employment. It's just that when it comes to a dispute, any employee who is not happy with the decision that the employer has made can go to the labor department and file a complaint. So it's a very process-driven situation where it goes through certain steps and processes. So I hope that answers Bill's question.
Yes, Bill said thank you. And the next question from Faris Shah. So how would you suggest we approach the issue of cost reduction with employees? The approach.
That's a very difficult one. I don't know the answer to that question. Again, it's really subjective, and every company may have a different cash flow situation. I know some are offering 20% pay cut, 30% pay cut. And I don't know, maybe there are employment lawyers out there who will be able to help this on the next session, perhaps, just on employment, because it's a very tricky and delicate issue just on employment itself. And obviously, we're dealing with people's livelihood. People need to eat, and how can they eat? And they've got commitments and things like that. So how do we approach the issue of cost reduction? Again, you really have to look at what's your burn rate now, how much is your operation cost, how much of it that you think your business will get disrupted because of this lockdown. They are industrial practice, I'm sure, just that from a percentage standpoint or a formula standpoint, I don't know the answer. I might be able to look at this, but to answer your question again, the two principles will continue to become important and act as a guiding principles for business owners, which would be, the first is to be fair, whether or not you are acting fairly towards your employees. If you are asking for a 70%, 80% pay cut, is that a fair thing to do? Are you acting in good faith? Are you doing it for the best interest of the business, or are you just taking advantage of the scenario right now? So looking at that angle in terms of fairness, whether it's acting in good faith, that will be the two underlying principle that governs the issue of cost reduction. So I hope that answers Farisha's question.
All right, so moving on to the next question is, how do you suggest we approach the issue of expensive office space with the landlord?
Again, I mean, obviously when we sign up for the fancy office space, we thought we were able to pay for it, but again, nobody would have expected this to happen. But again, when I spoke earlier about why it should be a good idea for you to have a chat with your landlord. Again, the scenario that we're going through is not just something that's happening to the tenants, but also landlords are also affected by it. The landlords may still need to be able to pay the installments and things like that. So to answer your question, how should you approach? Give your landlord a call, ask very nicely whether or not you can put a abatement, you can put a jettison the tenancy. Can you do a moratorium, 3 months, 6 months? Can you do a discounted rate? There's so many ways people are doing it. One of the obvious best scenario would be to get a deferment completely, or can you just... So how do you approach the issue? Again, try and get a mutual settlement if that is possible. If that's not possible, you can look at your lease agreement and see whether or not there is a ground for you to terminate. Just that the challenge for that will always be trying to manage a contentious scenario where the landlord may not be happy. So having that cozy relationship with landlord will be very useful, which is why if you've got a co-working space, perhaps many co-working spaces, without even asking for a moratorium, they've already frozen the account, which is a good thing on their side. So perhaps having that discussion, I mean, from a landlord perspective as well, if there's any landlord listening to this webinar as well, it may not be a good idea to force your tenant to pay the rental when you know that the tenant is already badly affected by this whole ongoing scenario. Maybe it may be a better idea to just allow for 3 or 6 months moratorium until things get better and see how things work from there on. So I hope that answers our anonymous attendee's question.
Yes, okay. So moving on to the next question is, apart from asking from money from investor, in your opinion, what else can we leverage from the investor to help us survive?
It's a very good question. I mean, Jeffrey Payne, if you got some time, go and look for that first live discussion. No, it's not live anymore because it's finished. So it's a recorded discussion on Founder Institute website. He spoke about the challenges that even venture capitals are facing because you need to rebalance their portfolio and what are the businesses that are doing well, the businesses that are not doing well. So from where you're coming from, if you are a early stage company who had received an investment, again, it also, I don't want to say depends, but it also depends on who's your investor. Is your investor a venture capital? Is your investor an angel investor? Because they may have a different scenario that they are grappling with. Perhaps if it's a venture capital, you may want to have a chat to constantly update them in terms of what's happening and what are you doing in terms of your contingency plan, making sure that the business stays on, and what are you doing in terms of helping if you made a projection that you're going to reach this goal, if you may not be able to reach that goal anymore, what are your thoughts in terms of managing that process? So if the investor may have a different connection, the idea is you may want to see whether or not the investor can help you connect with this person or that entity to help you to stay during this period that is difficult. So I hope that answers your question. It's not just money now, which is why it's so important to bring in an investor that not just give you money, but also other value-added benefits like open doors, connect with their network, connect with other people that could help you grow your business, not just during good times, but also during this challenging time that we are in right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Izan. Question from Vimalan. Okay, what is considered a good demonstration evidence of frustration due to MCO? Could you give us an example?
I'm just trying to find that question.
Good demonstration evidence of frustration due to MCO.
Yeah, so earlier I spoke about an example of a startup who book an event space, and a week later they can't do the event anymore because the government announced that everybody needs to stay at home. That would be potentially a clear-cut example of what it means when a contract has been frustrated. I can't do my event because I can't go out from the house. So if you are the event hall owner managing the property, you need to make a refund. So potentially speaking, perhaps the current Asia scenario will also be a frustration scenario where I book a flight ticket to go to Bali with my wife next week for my anniversary. I can't go for my anniversary anymore because the government won't let me fly or nobody is flying. So that will be a potential scenario where you can claim frustration. It's just that the challenge will always be from a contract standpoint. It's not clear cut. It's not something that can be invoked. Like it's not a termination clause that is there. Okay, if the contract is terminated, this happened. So it's very factual in nature, which is why it's so important to really understand the sequence as to how everything happened. Again, the concept of fairness is very important here. Even though if you are a supplier, you're running an e-commerce platform, you need to send this goods to your customer, but you can't send it because your normal logistics guy is decided he doesn't want to work because it's dangerous and all this thing. You have to go and source a new one. Just because of that ground, it may not be possible for you to say it's frustrated. So that will be an answer to that question. Is there any other question?
Yes,
Salvi?
we have a lot of questions. Okay, so another one in the chat box. We have a land deal where rental starts in June. It was signed in March with the allowance of 3 months rent free to develop the space before we can start operations. Because of this MCO, the land development has been pushed back quite significantly. If the landlord does not want to postpone the start of rent, can the discharge by frustration clause apply?
I'm trying to find the question that you found, but I don't see it. Maybe it's not in my thing. But again, I don't know whether I got. Okay, I found the question already. So again, this is a very technical. It's not a technical question. It's a very specific question. So what transpired was that you signed a tenancy or lease agreement where again, the thing about this discharge by frustration before you can invoke it, we really need to look at whether or not that the situation that you are in will permit you to invoke this clause. First, again, how are you able to demonstrate that because the fact that of the movement control order, you are not able to carry out your land development, and therefore, because of that scenario, you may find it difficult to complete your land deal, and just that whether or not the land development is tied together with the tenancy is another matter. I may not know this clearly, but again, the best scenario would be for you to speak to the landlord. Again, I know it's not an ideal answer, just that before you even invoke the discharge by frustration, you need to be able to demonstrate that you've done all you can to be able to carry out the land development. I think last week, the government is making an announcement to say that certain construction projects may be allowed to continue. So you maybe also want to be looking at that, whether or not your proposed land development may fall within this ambit of business that may continue to operate. So I hope that gives you a quick answer to your question.
All right, so moving on from Azra Aziz. So, in other words, in order to invoke force majeure or frustration principle, the party will need to try to fulfill the obligations stated in the contract first. Is it?
I'm trying to find the question.
336. Yeah, this one. From Azra.
Yeah, correct. So Azra is correct. So the point that needs to be done is that for a party to invoke frustration or even force majeure, it's not. Is the idea is that just because the clause is there, you can't go and use it because it's there. You must be able to show from your side that you have acted in good faith, that you have tried your best to satisfy your part of obligation, and because you can't do it because of if there's an earthquake that happen, if there is a tsunami, I mean, I'm not touch wood, I'm not just thinking out loud here. If there's an earthquake that happened and because of that you can't perform control, that's very clear cut. But in this scenario, is trying to link pandemic to a force majeure, for example, how does that really affect your business? So that's very important part that you need to effectively manage, because if this goes to court, which obviously we all hope will not happen, how would you be able to prove to the judge that yes, that we invoke this force majeure, we invoke this frustration because we've done A, B, C, D, E, but because we tried to do all this, but we can't do it, and because of that, we have no choice because the obligation became impossible for us to perform. So to recap, just because it made it more difficult for you to send the product to your client, that doesn't make it frustrated. Just because it made it more expensive for you to do your work, it doesn't make it frustrated. So it must be impossible, then that particular principle could be looked at.
All right. Okay, cool. For the next question, okay, it is from Chris Fong. Okay, from Chris Fong. Would you have any sensing on who funds, VC or angels are still investing in new deals in this climate?
Yeah. So again, Chris, you should really look at that discussion with Jeffrey Payne today, this morning, from Golden Gate Ventures. I think he gave a very interesting perspective of what are the things that VCs are still looking at. Things like healthcare, education. Like people will do a lot more online learning right now, so that will still be an interesting area. I mean, there are so-called winners in this. It sounds very wrong, I mean, to say that, but they are the guys that will benefit from this lockdown, because people still need to do, people still need to learn and open learning from home. Schools are trying to find what are the online software or modules that they can effectively apply for the students. The teachers are looking for online learning tools. So these are the things that VCs are looking at. Again, I'm not a venture capital, so I may not know much about what are they looking at. Again, different VCs have different appetite when it comes to investment, but these are the hotspot area that you can look at. Agriculture is a big thing. Food tech is another one. We're talking about food security right now. People are worried because whether or not we got enough rice in our stockpile to last for X months, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, is a big question mark for many of us. But again, people still need to eat. People still need to consume. People still need to survive. Some fintech solution, and some areas like climate change related area, tech, science tech, looking at long-term investment. People are still looking at that, but again, the challenge for that will be there are not many of those deals in this part of region in Southeast Asia. So I hope that answers Chris' question. For angels, obviously, we are looking at so many social enterprises coming out, doing so many wonderful things, and hopefully we see more people and VCs investing in social enterprises moving forward. I hope that answers Chris' question.
All right, thank you, Izwan. All right, so next question from Vimalan again. So do you have any opinions regarding selling vouchers for future sales? For example, gift cards as a way to generating cash flow. This is the concern is that we don't really know when the MCO will end or how the market will be then.
Yep, thanks, Bimala, for the question. Um, I mean, again, it is ultimately, again, I don't know about your business model, but what you're asking is whether or not you'll be able to pre-sell, or just like the guys who make pre-orders, or you take the money first and then you perform the obligation in the future, or you buy bulk order and things like that for cash flow. I think the challenge for that, for obviously from a contractual standpoint, you're making a promise that you're going to do A, B, C, D, E for people. So the customers are taking the risk because they're paying for you in advance for you to perform your obligation at certain period of time in the future. So from that angle, the question would be, if you're selling gift cards, then the next 3 months or 2 months or next few weeks, if the lockdown is no longer in place and the client wants to use the voucher and things like that, you need to be able to make sure that this don't come, there'll be no floodgate of this coming up from your side. How do you manage that process in the whole scheme of things? So I hope that answers the question very quickly. Obviously, we do not know how long the MCO will end and how the market will take. But again, that's where you need to do your A/B testing, see whether it works, and how you're managing that process. I hope that answers Bimala.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Vimala, yes, thank you to Izwan. All right. So the next question is from Han Asuka. What's your advice to travel startup about what they should do now to prepare for the post-pandemic?
Again, I'm not trying to promote other people here, but the discussion that I saw this evening was very interesting. Even morning was interesting. People will still need to travel, whether we like it or not. I mean, the idea is that perhaps some people may say, okay, I'll give it 3 months or 6 months before I decide to travel, and some people will still need to go to work after this pandemic is over. Perhaps some people may find it uh, unusual to travel because they've not been traveling for a bit. But from a travel tech or travel startup standpoint, you can look at what Airbnb is doing now. They've got this virtual reality thing. They've got this experiential thing. They're trying to pivot into a new area. That will be something that you can look at, not suggesting that you should copy, but that will be something that will be worthwhile exploring. That's how they're trying to stay relevant, if you like. So when it comes to post-pandemic, perhaps, obviously, again, I'm not a regular traveler, but again, try to think about people will still continue to travel. It's just that the challenge will be how long before people start traveling. And I mean, Asia, Malaysia Airlines, they're still trying to also encourage people to travel, which is why our friend Tan Sri Tony Fernandez is asking everybody to take credit instead of refund, because obviously there's a different reason for that. But the idea is that you should think about how would the post-pandemic change how people travel. I don't think people will travel differently. People will still travel. It's just that how do you capture that small target group of consumer that will still want to travel, because people will still want to travel. Some people want to celebrate their first year anniversary. They promise to go to Bali next week. They still want to travel. So maybe they want to travel right after the holiday. So these are the things that I'm just speculating, that you should do your market research and see what people appetite will be. I hope that answers your question, Han.
All right, thank you, Izwan. Okay, we have a question from Aravin Vivek. At this current point of time, MCO and pandemic, what's the general appropriate measures in steering a newly launched startup has been tough in customer acquisition? Thank you very much.
Hi, Arvin. Thanks for your question. Again, it's a very difficult question. What is the general appropriate measure? Again, I don't know what your newly launched startup is, but I wish you best in this challenging environment. Not saying in a very sarcastic way, just that from a customer acquisition standpoint, again, even from a VC or investor standpoint, people are not really looking at customer traction or how many likes do you have in your social media, which they may be good, but ultimately, can you make revenue in this challenging time? So for example, if you are running an e-commerce platform, can you still sustain sales? How do you make sure that logistics still work? How do you do it in such a lean manner as possible? So what would be the appropriate measure in steering a new launch? I mean, obviously, keep your costs low. If you don't need to get all these expensive subscription, you don't need them. What would be the bare minimum for you to be able to operate your startup? If you are not able to pay a staff full time, maybe you can get the person on a outsourcing arrangement, work in a few hours, you can sign a normal service agreement, be clear, there's a scope as to what is suspected and what are the fee allowance that you're paying. Again, people who decide to think of leaving their current job to start a new business, you should really think about that decision, whether or not that's something that you can be able to sustain yourself from a cash flow standpoint if you're bootstrapping. So yeah, I hope I answer Aravin's question.
Okay. And then the last one is from David Gan. Can you share the link to the presentation file again? I believe our live today is recorded, and just now Izwan showed the link, right, in the presentation.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so I just put my website here. So you just go there to the website. You can get the deck over there. There's a Google Doc, so you can just download it and have a look at it. I don't know. I hope this session has been useful to everyone.
Yes, correct.
I'll
Okay, is
try.
there any question? I think, Aravin say thanks, Izwan and Sabri. And
Thank you. You're welcome. I just hope that everyone is taking care of themselves, and again, try to really think, do some thinking about what you can do. Look at what other people are doing. I'm not trying to suggest that you should copycat, but see how you can do better. Hopefully that will be useful. So take care. And
Yeah, Bill said. Thanks,
hopefully once
Izwan.
again,
All the best. All right. Okay. Anything else? Last word from Izwan to the audience before we wrap up.
again, hope everyone's taking care of themselves. I know everybody is frustrated that they can't launch their product or they want to do something, they can't go see the client, they can't close the deal. It's going to be more difficult to run around. I know this is difficult, but at the same time, this whole restriction for myself is helped me in terms of really trying to do things which I've been meaning to do, like sit down and think, do more reading, the books that you said you wanted to read 3 months ago. Maybe it's a good time to pick up that book and spend some time reading. Some of us were still working, how you can create value in terms of how you can do a bit more. I think right now, all of us in the even local startup community should be closer to each other, helping each other. As for myself, as a small law firm working with a lot of tech companies and startup, what I'm trying to do is to share my ideas and thoughts and how I can help from where I'm coming from on the legal side. So if you are running a cloud storage or cloud, if you're running, I'm just thinking out loud here, if you're running e-commerce, what will be something that you can help other guys who are affected, because everybody is affected in this. It's not just startup here. So let's try to help each other in whatever way we can, because people will remember each other who help other people. So I think that's very important. I believe in paying forward, so that's what I try to do. I hope everybody follows the same thinking as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Izwan. Before we end our session, I would like to share a few programs that we are having. Okay, so this is today's topic. Okay, so we have Global Accelerator Program, GAP Cohort 4. Application is now open and the registration will be closed on 60th April 2020. And for more information, you may log into www.mymagics.my/cap. And the next one is Magic Digital Business Academy, DBA. For more information, you can log into www.mymagic.my/online academy. And last but not least, you'll be having PUSH, Pemangkin Usahawan Sosial Hebat. So you will have access to education, scale up, accreditation, advisory. So for more information, you may log into www.mymagic.my/push. All right, so thank you. And we have another one. Sorry, University Startup Challenge. And for more information, you may log into www.mymagic.my/USC. All right. Okay. Thank you very much to Izwan for today's session. And it's a very good sharing session and a very informative session. And hope to see you, all of you, again. Until then, thank you. Stay safe, stay home, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.